We have an amazing group of panelists joining us here this afternoon. I'd like to first say a huge thank you to you guys for taking the time out of your busy schedules to discuss this important topic with our community. Let's get started by having our panelists introduce themselves to our audience and tell us about how you became involved in combating human trafficking.
Okay, I guess I'll go first since I'm listed there first on the PowerPoint. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's a great honor. So my name is Jessica Wicke Bird, and I am the Program Director of Internships at the Rosen College of Hospitality Management. I'm also a faculty member, and I teach in the tourism events and attractions faculty. The way we got kind of involved with human trafficking was we have a leadership speaker series in partnership with our internship courses at the Rosen College. And in the spring of 2019, we invited Tomas Larraz, the president of United Abolitionists, to come in and present on human trafficking in the hospitality industry. 200 students attended the workshop. 30 students after the workshop said they identified trafficking in their workplace. One student believed they were about to be trafficked. We took this very, very personally and very much to heart. And we decided to create some curriculum to train our future leaders in the industry to be able to identify, report, and end human trafficking. And it's something that we're very proud of at the Rosen College in our hospitality and tourism program.
All right, I'll go next since I guess I'm next on the list. My name is Brad Bakeman. I'm a sergeant with the Orlando Police Department, and I'm currently assigned to the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, which is a task force here in the 9th Circuit. So we cover Orange and Osceola County, and we handle all the human trafficking investigations within that area. And then I'm also the chair of the Central Florida Human Trafficking Task Force, which is kind of a multifaceted task force where it is the kind of a three-pronged approach where we work on the educating and awareness, making sure our services are top-notch and everything is covered in our county, and then also the law enforcement and the prosecution side. So I've been with the Orlando Police Department for 14 years. And in this past year is when I kind of came over to MBI and really started working with the victims and suspects of human trafficking.
Hi, my name is Jill Bolander Cohen. I am the founder and CEO of the Lifeboat Project. We are a service provider for victims of human trafficking, labor, and sex, and we provide full wraparound services. I'm also the co-founder of the Greater Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force, which was the task force before Central Florida, before the name was changed. And I co-founded that in 2013 with Tomas Larraz and a few other people.
Hi, I'm Lauren Portal, and I am a victim advocate with the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation. Sergeant Bakeman is my boss. I've been an advocate for a little over 10 years. I actually started in the working in a domestic violence shelter and took a class at UCF, because I am a UCF graduate, on trafficking. And since then, it's just become an interest. And now I am an advocate with MBI, working with trafficking victims.
Thank you guys so much again for being here with us. We really look forward to the information that you can share with our community. We have compiled a group of questions for our panelists to help our audience learn more about human trafficking, how it impacts our community, and how we can support survivors of trafficking. Our goal with this Q&A is to start a greater conversation and to raise awareness on this very important topic with our community. Sergeant Bakeman, could you please start by telling us what human trafficking is and where it commonly occurs? Oh, I think you're on mute.
There we go.
There we go.
Human trafficking is a modern day form of slavery, to put it in easy terms, but it involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of exploiting a person. And here in Florida, our statutes are written to, a lot of our organizations are very broad, and each person within that organization will have a different role on their job specifically in the organization for trafficking these victims. So in Florida, it can involve transporting, soliciting, recruiting, harboring, providing, enticing, maintaining, and obtaining. I think one of the big ones there is obtaining, because I think a lot of people think of human trafficking as actual selling of a human being, which it also can be those who are purchasing. So when it comes to the commercial sex acts, it's also important to realize that while you may think you're committing a simple misdemeanor of soliciting a prostitute, you could very well be soliciting a victim of human trafficking, which then puts you as a suspect of human trafficking. There's some confusion out there on the difference between human trafficking and smuggling. A lot of people confuse the two and think they are interrelated, and they can be interrelated, but human trafficking can occur without being smuggled into the United States. It does not involve necessarily a person being moved. It can just be maintained. They can harbor them in their house. They can recruit them. There's all sorts of different ways they can do it, where smuggling is actually bringing someone across the border. The victim in that is actually the United States or whatever state or country it may be. Something else to think about is the myths of human trafficking. There's been a lot of posts, especially recently on social media and in the news, about white vans pulling up and kidnapping, young women, kids. There's the myth about tying ribbons around windshield wipers and stuff like that. Baby carriages left on the side of the roads. And if people get out and observe that, look into it, that's when they're getting kidnapped. And I'm not going to sit here and say that that can't happen, but there are a lot of myths that are being pushed right now to scare the public. And as far as where it occurs, unfortunately, wherever there's a demand is where it will occur. And Central Florida, unfortunately, is a hotbed for that, where we have the tourist industry and we have the agricultural industry here in Central Florida. So for the labor side of trafficking, we have lots of farms and orange fields and hotels that may be more susceptible to the labor trafficking. And then we also have the large tourist district to include the hotels, the convention center, the theme parks, where you're having tons of tourists coming in. And unfortunately, when they come in, they're looking for, a lot of them are looking for the prostitution, which then the traffickers will bring the victims here to Central Florida to help field that demand.
Thank you so much for that answer. I know this is such an important topic that we're talking about today with us being in Central Florida. So I'm really glad you're able to share this information with us. How do you identify victims of human trafficking?
So the task force as a whole, as far as the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigations, our number one way of identifying victims is tips. So that's where it's so important for the public to be aware and educated on what human trafficking is and what the victims may show signs of and what the traffickers may show signs of. A hard part of it is that the victims oftentimes don't see themselves as victims. They see that as what they're doing is their role in a relationship with their trafficker, and it's what they're supposed to be doing. So it makes it a little bit difficult to identify these victims. As far as awareness for the public to be looking for in regards to the victims, you can look for things like, when it comes to the young women, if they're getting their hair done, if they're getting their nails done, their makeup, laser hair removal, stuff like that, that normally they wouldn't be able to afford, but now all of a sudden they're getting done. The question is going to be, how are they getting the money for this? Where are they getting the money for it? And oftentimes it's going to be from their trafficker, because they're grooming them to become more valuable in the streets. Cell phones. So if you have a friend, if you have a child, whoever it may be, and you start seeing them shuffle through multiple cell phones, the cell phone a parent may give to the child is no longer there, but they have another cell phone. Because a lot of times the traffickers will try to distance themselves from distance the victim from their comfort zone. So in doing so, they'll take their phone away from them and give them another phone where they can only communicate with the trafficker and those associated in their organization. Malnourishment is a big one too. A lot of these victims are worked hour after hour after hour. And to the trafficker, it is nothing but money. So if they're taking time away from working and they're eating food and whatnot, then obviously they're taking away money from the pockets of the traffickers. Another big one is if you see somebody that's with another person and they look to them for answers. So if you're in a doctor's office, you're in a pharmacy, you're in a store, you're in a restaurant, and you ask them a question, they will look to their trafficker for an answer, or they'll have a very scripted answer because they're afraid of saying the wrong things, and their trafficker wants to make sure they control what they say. So they will look to the trafficker. They won't make eye contact with you, very little eye contact. A lot of our victims are going to be runaways. I'd say the majority of them are. Education, I would say for the most part, they are undereducated, closer to the poverty level, because they're the ones that are out there seeking for another way to fulfill their wants and their needs. They're not getting it from home. They're not getting it from school. So they'll go out there and the traffickers just swarm in on that. And unfortunately, get them in their grips and start trafficking them.
Thank you so much. What are common recruitment methods that traffickers use to get these individuals?
Okay, well, that's another one. While it may happen, the kidnapping part of human trafficking isn't something we see a lot of. We see it very rarely. For the most part, the recruitment involves, we call it like a Romeo pimp, where they will actually move in and become a boyfriend. They will make the victims fall in love with them and just give them the world. They'll give them everything they want. And again, kind of speaking to what I spoke about, it's filling that void that these victims have never had filled before. And so they lean on these traffickers for more and more and more. And then one day the trafficker is going to flip that switch, and they're no longer the boyfriend. They're no longer that Romeo. And this is where they, start making the demands of, well, now you owe me all this money. You owe me all this time. So you need to start doing this and that. They'll give them empty promises. A lot of times they'll offer record deals or time in the studios, photography, modeling. You'll see posters or bulletins out on boards, offering to take their pictures and get them, in front of the right crowds where they'll make all sorts of money being a model or a musician. And again, that's just something to bring them in. And then once they get them in that atmosphere, they completely switch the list and like, oh, that's not really what this is. You need to perform sex acts. And then you perform these sex acts, then we will get you where you want. But those promises are never actually fulfilled. And the big one right now that we're dealing with is social media. Everybody's on social media. There's so many different platforms and apps out there where these, I'm going to say kids, but it's adults too, are communicating. And the traffickers have found, you can send a private message to hundreds, if not thousands of girls across the internet with a click of one button. And if they send out 1,000 messages, they'll get 5 that answer and say, hey, yeah, I'm interested. Because it's the same way as far as the Romeo, they'll offer them, we're here in Central Florida. They'll contact girls up in Washington or Minnesota or somewhere it's cold. And then, they'll say, hey, come down here. We'll party. We'll hang out. We'll go to the beach. We'll do this. And then once they get down here, they're like, okay, you owe me $500 for the plane. You owe me $250 for the hotel. And that debt is never able to be paid off. So it's just a continual circle where they'll give the trafficker that $100, but well, you spent $250 at the hotel, so you owe me another $150. So the debt just keeps growing. There's no realistic way to pay off that debt. But social media is a huge one right now. And the other one's just in person. We have spoken to traffickers. There's videos out there where you're interviewing traffickers, and they will tell you that they will see, a group of 4 or 5 girls walking, and they can pick out exactly which one that they're going to go approach because they're showing signs of low self-esteem, vulnerable. These traffickers are very good at what they do. They are master manipulators, and they will get inside these victims' heads and, again, promise the world to them, Romeo them, and say, come with me, I'll give you what you want. And if they find that crack in the victim, once they get in there, it's very difficult to get out.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Wiki, we often hear about sex trafficking in the media. Does human trafficking only result in sexual exploitation?
It does not. And I'm Jessica Wiki. I'm not Dr. Wiki, but thank you for promoting me. I like that. I like that a lot. So yes, there's not only sexual exploitation, but there's labor exploitation, what Brad was just referring to. So, everyone thinks of human trafficking as the movie Taken, where they come in and they kidnap the person and they go away with them. And it's not that at all. What Brad was already started talking about is looting, is they groom the victims to be part of it. And so labor trafficking often starts, especially bringing people from outside of the United States inside the United States. It starts with a job posting advertising a better life in the United States of America, whether this be to come over here to be a nanny or to be a model or to work with an organization. And then they get here and they've now been forced into some kind of labor trafficking where they're used force, fraud, or coercion to stay here. There's three really different types of labor trafficking. There's bonded labor, there's forced labor, and there's child labor. So bonded labor is really the least known form of labor trafficking, but it's the most widely used. It's exactly that they come here for the purpose of a job, then they get here, they're paid very low wages, they live in very disturbing different home situations, whether there's 10 people to a bedroom, they're asked to work very long hours with little breaks, not a lot of food, and very little money. And often the traffickers will take their passports in order to keep them in that labor, in that forced labor situation. So it's really, really hard for the bonded labor or forced labor. In forced labor, the traffickers will use violence to keep them in that situation. You see a lot of this that's happened in some research within agriculture, and that they're actually forced to stay there on their location and work day and night through the threat of violence, either violence to them or violence to their family back home. And then you have child labor. Anybody under the age of 18, that there are different laws in different states, but you can't ask a person to work at 5 years old. So anyone who's working out there, is say in agriculture, in the fields, or even in different industries, child labor is not allowed in the United States under a certain age. So the International Labor Organization actually estimates that there were 246 million children working right now as a form of child labor across the world, which is really quite disturbing. Then you have sex trafficking. And so this is really the common one that everyone talks about, sex trafficking. What is this? Is it prostitution? Is it grooming to where you think you're actually working to earn a wage to help your boyfriend out? But it's really, sex trafficking is defined as recruitment, harboring, and transportation of obtaining the person for commercial sex. If that person is under the age of 18, this is considered sex trafficking. You cannot consent to sex under the age of 18. So anybody under that age is not is considered sex trafficking. Some of the most common environmental situations that you will see with trafficked victims, specifically with minors in America, they're the homeless, youth, and runaways. According to MBI, in the last task force meeting, they said that in 2019, 100% of the juveniles that were rescued were runaways in Central Florida. 100%. So that's really, really scary data. Those who are suffering in poverty, those who have suffered physical or sexual abuse, disruptions for normal environment, those who are in the foster care system, those who are fit into the LGBTQ category, or minors suffering substance abuse. So it's really a key area that we can help other minors that you see or might be going through these, or that they are the people who need our help the most. And those are some of the signs that go with that.
Thank you so much for informing our audience about this. How does human trafficking manifest within the hospitality industry?
So that's a great question. And this is something that we're excited to do at the Rosen College. So we launched in the summer of 2020 curriculum on human trafficking in the hospitality and tourism industry. We did a full launch in the fall, and now every single one of our 3,000 plus students will be trained to be able to identify and report trafficking. This is really important because they're the future leaders of hotels and convention centers, the future general managers across the area, and they'll have the resources to do that. So what does this look like in the hospitality industry? 80% of victims that were trafficked in sex trafficking were rescued from hotels. 80%. So this means that our industry needs to be able to identify and report so that we can save these victims. And what this also looks like in the hospitality industry is oftentimes the large events, specifically within, I'll say, Super Bowls and Pro Bowls and big, large events, those are breeding grounds for traffickers. And if you look at our United States and the state system, so a lot of people are trafficked through our highways throughout the states. So when big events happen, you can actually see where the traffickers are bringing down victims in order to make money during these large events. So according to research by the Polaris Project, the top venues for industry in sex trafficking, spa parlors was #1, hotels was #4. So that's part of our industry. We really need to educate so that we can be able to identify victims to help them out with that. Also, large events in the Super Bowl that just passed 2 years ago, the FBI had 169 human trafficking related arrests within 11 days up to the game. In the Minneapolis Final Four game of 2019, 58 arrests of sex trafficking and soliciting. These traffickers know a lot of people are coming down for an event that should be a great, fun family time. But what's happening is now it's bringing in victims as well. And so that's an area we really need to focus on in educating our hospitality, our future hospitality leaders, also people who are going to be in the hospitality community. If you're at a hotel, you identify something, you need to say something. If you're at a large sporting event, if you're in an airport, if you're in a restaurant, it's up to you to say something. And so that's why it's really important to understand the dynamic of how the hospitality industry incorporates with human trafficking.
Absolutely. Again, just being in Orlando with it being such a big tourist town, this is just, it's so important for us to be aware of these signs. That way that these incidents can get reported.
Absolutely, Mandy. Absolutely.
What are some indicators that someone might be a victim of human trafficking within the hospitality industry?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that as well. And so, as you said, Orlando, the #1 destination in the United States in 2019 with 75 million visitors. We are a hotspot. So what that means is that a lot of people are coming here. To go back a little bit to labor trafficking, we have a staffing demand pre-pandemic, where we would have a lot of third-party vendors that to be able to hire non-front facing roles. So landscapers, cleaners, housekeepers, things like that. Using third-party vendors that aren't vetted could be also a breeding ground for traffickers. So when you're out there working in a hotel, running a hotel, working in a restaurant, keep your eye out for those people that aren't necessarily part of your team on your hotel team, but they're working with you so that you can identify these signs as well. So if you're looking for someone who's trafficking, again, what Brad was saying, if somebody is speaking for them, they're not speaking for themselves. They don't have their own identification. They don't have their own cell phone. If they're checking into a hotel, they're not given their own room key. When they're checking in the hotel, if the person checking in much older with a younger person, the younger person might look disheveled, a little dirty, not speaking much, not making eye contact. If they ask for a room on the outside of the hotel, it's a big key indicator right there. If they're showing signs of being physically or emotionally controlled, you can kind of see that by body language. You can see that their shoulders are down, their head is down. They don't have anything in their hands. They have no personal belongings, no purse. Nobody leaves the house, man or woman, child, without a cell phone in their hand, a purse, a Coke, something. If they're standing there with nothing in their hands, looking down, there's something going on. Also, if they have none of their own documentation, right? No possessions. They don't know where they're going or where they're from. Having conversations with, if you end up talking to someone, they're not sure where they're going or where they're coming from. If they have bruises about them, they feel, helpless, have that look of helplessness. They're becoming isolated from family members and things like that. Additional signs in hospitality as well, besides the hotel, the restaurant, the events, is looking at, are they there every single day? If you're working in a hotel, if you're working in the restaurant, do you see this person every single day when you go to work? You think, why I've seen Jessica there. She's here Monday, she's Tuesday, Wednesday, she's here at 9 p.m., she's here at 7 a.m. So take that into consideration and start doing a little research, because that's form of labor trafficking. And if you see some of your friends in the hospitality industry that you think all of a sudden have all these nice purses and nice things, like Brad was saying, how are they getting those? So kind of do some research and don't be afraid to ask questions, but be safe about it as well.
Absolutely. Lauren, once a victim of trafficking has been identified and recovered, what's the biggest challenges that you have to address with them?
Well, I think we can all agree there are many, many challenges. A big challenge is if the victim wants help. Victims may not define their experience as abusive, so they may not want to leave. They often feel a big, strong psychological dependence on the traffickers, and sometimes they don't even realize that they're being exploited. Another challenge is working with child victims and their home life. Many come from unstable and unhealthy homes. So once they're recovered and they go back home, they run away again, go back to their trafficker or another trafficker, and the cycle continues. Also, safe homes and youth shelters in Florida, they're not locked, they're voluntary. All of these places are basically voluntary. So if a child is at a safe home, they can leave when they want to. And again, the cycle continues. Definitely limited availability, wait list, access to appropriate mental health services, or possibly the mental health professional, they're not trained in the trauma that the victims did have or have. There's also difficulty establishing a trusting relationship with victims. Many survivors have had people come in and out of their life, possibly their whole life. Lots of promises have been made and broken. So they may be thinking, what makes me different or her different or him different that the other people have promised with help? How is this person going to be any different? So that trusting thing is very hard. And that's why it's so great that a lot of agencies do have victim advocates, so that they have that one person that they can reach out to. Also, foreign-born trafficking victims face additional barriers that could be language, culture, isolation from their family that's in a different country. And also another challenge is cooperation with law enforcement. Without a doubt, we want the victim safe and to receive services, but we also want the trafficker off the street. Law enforcement wants to prevent future victims. And the trafficker, honestly, they deserve to be in jail. So those are definitely some of the biggest challenges we have.
Thank you so much for your insight into that. Can you tell us about the types of resources that are available to survivors to address these immediate needs that you've kind of brought to our attention?
Absolutely. So when we're, recovering or rescuing someone, we determine their basic needs. Is emergency shelter available? Do they need some food? I feel like one of the biggest things that I do is go to McDonald's to feed a lot of these people that they haven't eaten. We provide them with clothing, mask, any feminine products that they may need at the time. We also determine if detox is needed. An advocate provides crisis counseling and emotional support. And what crisis counseling does is it helps an individual to restore some sense of control and mastery after a crisis event. So individuals can be overwhelmed emotionally, so it's very good to have someone there, providing that emotional support and crisis counseling. We determine if any medical attention is needed, if any forensic exam is needed. And Florida does have victim crime compensation to help with any medical bills and possibly relocation funds for the victim. We answer any questions or discuss any fears that they may have. For example, immigration. Traffickers often use immigration over victims' heads. If you go to the police, you're going to get deported. So we want to make sure that we address the fears and the lies that they have been told of why not to trust the person that's recovered them. We also provide transportation to the shelter or back home. And then also a safety plan. Safety plans are very important. A safety plan is a personalized, practical plan to improve their safety. And the plan can include vital information tailored to their needs situation. So it will prepare them and respond to different scenarios. So but he has to think clearly on ecological decisions during the crisis. So having a safety plan like that will definitely help them solve for them.
Sometimes it's personal situations. Can you elaborate on the difficulties behind a survivor meeting these scenarios?
Absolutely. There are many reasons why someone should be a tracker, and every victim may have a different reason. And limited to these situations and their situations, so there's a huge sense of ways to that tracker. There can be emotional attachment, trackers and victims believe that they love them, they're very attractive. And that's manipulation being too restrictive, psychological confinement. If there's a possibility that there's a victim or your loved ones, can leave me, I will go with your family. It's possibility threatened by revenge or social media right now is so huge. When it comes to trafficking, there could be substance or alcohol addiction, and the trafficker fights them with those substances. Keeping these drugs, and all you gotta do is walk that street and work. Then there's possibility they feel they're not being they're not this is very because they're trying to doing trafficking. This is normal life or body here and help. And of course, it's also not about the different alternatives and resources to help. Many victims don't know there's different options and support available to them. You have a lot of friends. I have no idea while they're telling me.
Thank you so much. So can you talk about long-term impact in trafficking panel survivors?
Yes, well, I would say the biggest we see is trauma and stress. But it's about and then I don't know because that's where researchers are almost never for them. But sometimes we see if there's been sexual trauma, abuse at a younger age, and it's not addressed. Sometimes there's before they even tell it. So it's very important that we give them some kind of counseling therapy and how to understand to work with their triggers. But they're in a trigger versus device. We had a survivor, unfortunately she was kidnapped and came from up north and was sat down here, Homeland Security and judgment rather than town because the traffickers were looking for her. She was kidnapped and when she was at the facility, and I think her to her parent, and I said, "How to eat here on the refrigerator?" And I opened the door and I pulled out cheese stick and handed it to her. But I handed her and she freaked out. She said, "I don't understand." She says, "When I was kidnapped for," and then she said, "For 5 days, 100 hours, 20 minutes," and she said that was the only thing they would feed me because the trappers had children and they would take these cheese sticks from children's lunchbox. And that was a that one day she told me else run help. So she a bunch of papers. And all of a sudden she looks at me and says, "I need to call my therapist." And I said, "Okay, try paper." She said, "You don't understand." She says, "No." She said, "We places that we live, there were that size of a small kitten, and they made nests with like the paper, shred paper, like nests." And so I told her, "So this is the trauma and triggers they have that we see, and so a lot of survivors we have to try to protect their life, but real counseling is the key and how to deal with it.
Can you tell us a little bit about the offered by the project or survivors transition to new opportunities?
Sure. So when I got with the project some years ago, and task force, especially task force, I think we need to have a good relationship with law enforcement and other NGOs. That's not happening in although in a sense, I don't understand that we're in both of them, and what we do. And so I knew that housing was important. People would say, "Oh, you gotta receive, you gotta do this," and then put them somewhere. And I don't like, what do you do with them? And sitting in a program and handing them a certificate because they graduated, because they then your program listen to what you have to say, that they're healed. No, they're not. And a certificate is not getting housing and shelter and therapy, and that's what they need. So I am a real stickler and adamant about having housing and medical services. So 3 years ago, Lifeboat was gifted 4 properties. We have partnered with the Human Foundation. We have one conventional one is LGBTQ, that is filled. We have 2 beds, 2 beds for crisis. A lot of the apartments are fluid. One thing we were not doing was taking mothers with children, but we have time to get back to us, and I really kind of had these myself that say something was going to grow, and so we have taken in just 3 years. So we're trying it. A mother with my child up to the age of 5, and we have our first women, we have our transgender, and so we have deals with many that are immigrants, and they're all optimized. So we kind of have all there. And background services, medical, part of the community. 8 of our survivors have started back to college for the first time or going back. Last week, a company partnered with us in the community to provide Christmas, and they were excited to hear that they went back to college. So we all have years plus years old. So that is totally exciting. And that's what we do. We just seem to love life as a family. It's not for everybody. You're not faith-based. So you have to go to Bible school or church. I am Christian, and I had a whole bunch of things that you show Christ through your actions, and that's what we do. And we're very, very much a family. No one's ever kicked out of the Lifeboat project. They may lose the rights to live in our properties if there's some kind of crazy thing going on. But our doors are always open. We have several community clients that we work with that just basically follow them something and follow them just to make sure that they have safety net, they don't fall through the cracks. So that's what we do.
Okay.
I don't prefer to work with law enforcement and kind of saying you want these guys away. Business cases are easy, and we work to try to see if we work with law enforcement first, working with the therapists to they're very law enforcement, especially in another country, not in real stuff. So over time, I found business counseling. The resource United States that's really them, but through counseling and working with criminal therapists, they start to be more. Sometimes it's based on time. So like I said, law enforcement. Law enforcement is also part of the organization that was led by the Department of Justice about 18 years ago, and the Department of Justice said what is it that we're seeing this human trafficking? It's not just prostitution. So the service providers across the United States that are in Washington, and these service providers decided to start their own coalition basically. It's called the Freedom Network USA, and so they're head by State Department, and it's extremely difficult to get in. So when I started 10 years ago, because I'm interested in DC USA, we embedded the Freedom Network, and we started bringing in training. So I trained for Sheriff's Department and FBI about 10 years ago. We wanted more, so we're on training, and that's really where the Lifeboat project got started from. And so we do take several of our clients, a lot of clients who come from the Freedom Network connection. So there's 6 of us in Florida. Lifeboat is the only one in Central Florida, and they have to take the human rights based approach. And if you don't, they will definitely kick you out and have conflict. And so, but it's just what we believe. Taking every victim center, we let them drive. They're here on the wrong side of it. If you still like I push pull them, I'm not going to be late. It's not for you right now. I'm ready. I like ready, but I have to really come back. So
that's great. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us. So, Pam, still for you to join in these questions, audience. The first is, can you guys tell us about how human trafficking might affect the culture population?
I think I'll start with this lead at college. And this first, that's fantastic. That aids the students going to college and stuff. That is just fantastic. Maybe like it's a very topic. And then there's in the tunnel, so many people in the it's really why we're having this discussion. Then there's resources. So how does human trafficking manifest within the college population? Is there's a big thing right now called sugar daddy. It's telling them all the time. Sugar daddy.com. This is something that attracts young college students to make money, and they basically use platforms like social media. Facebook is number 1. Social media platforms human trafficking, and you use such sugar daddy.com to entice young students to make money. They can escort them trafficked. And so that's the number 1 key to look at as a college population. Another one is that college media. Think about it. And also educate yourself. Educate yourself. I'll tell you one quick story that one of my colleagues told me that. And another student told me the same story. They were pushed out of college campus by an older woman with the Bible, and that would you like to join the women's Bible study group. And the student decided to take 2 minutes. I'm going to talk to you again. And so this is an attractive because it's 2 people. How do you answer the same story on college campus? So those are things you want to look at for our population. Be educated and be clear. If something doesn't feel right, don't feel you have to be nice and respectful and do it. No, okay, and help. Your safety is
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing there. I think what you said is really important in our UCF community. Charlotte is also wondering how our community helps support human trafficking efforts in the Florida area. Can you tell us about our community that might be able to help?
I think it's important that we have things like this. Awareness is the key. My future are right now, they understand what's going on. So we definitely want that, definitely want to involve with this. Also, volunteering that we do, the always opportunities of this, probably 10 to 20 to do something with trafficking, help victims. And another thing is different task force. There's the national trafficking. So, there's a whole bunch of there's national trafficking Orlando, New Orlando at the campus next Friday. So that's definitely good. Really important and also trafficking is going on. So it's all about really getting involved, volunteering, things along those lines.
Absolutely. Finally, I'm just going to give you a second.
I would on that one. This may have a ago. I think one of the best things to do is we try not to be our public involved, public zero. Something we really right is make it make it myself. I'll try to be very mindful, so it's something we really have to do it. Try to do this, and that said, all these because the easiest way, there's a provider there that will come in and help report these victims. A lot of times law enforcement is first calls, and they have their support response. If the guy has necessarily support response, but if you call 911, you see something like that, and do get demands the emergency level, so call 911, call ambulance, whatever you do, and give all information and because the windows for these victims is so small. If it's a window and they come forward and say, I want to be recovered, I need help. They could again for seconds, do this, you really, you have the time, or you have after their seconds to come off. And it's also a small window as far as if you see something, it's not going to be that long. So if you plan stuff and you call those and record after the fact, intel and communications like that, really trying to get that recorded and get the help they need right then. You need to call 911. Because I totally started, there has been law enforcement has treated human trafficking as just a prostitution crime for a long time, and recently there's been a big push to get law enforcement everything, not just investigating our approach, we're trying to control that. While they make standards of guys work with me, as far as interviews and skills of doing the conversation with victims, are very close to the situation, and they pick up the signs and they're recognizing trafficking for this, and they would call, and they call me, and they're like, on someone back to me and say, hey, I got on all these stuff, all the false bitches too. Someone told me, don't think what you are wrong, but they what you're right. So it's, I go say, we calls, and I don't anything that one call comes in, really that big off street, not a cycle, then it's over. So don't forget call. Please, all sorts of crazy calls, please leave me right now.
I agree. Very important process. We can't just look at people saying, "Gosh, that's prostitute, person promiscuous." So there's anything along those lines. Because we think about it on our problem now, because they're just that's the problem. But actually, we recognize that there's actual could be traffic. They may need help. They have to what they're you see something, you say something. Even if we have some nursing students on here, and you're like, "I'm traffic." Okay, let's do we want all these calls. National Human Trafficking Services get help. So it's all about see something, say something, and that really help in our fighting against crimes.
Thank you all for addressing these concerns. Take some time for asking questions. There's time on the chat for our audience. Feel free to enter your question in the chat so we can see the ways to and we'll need you to see signal.
It's really text me, for them or something. It's usually something the text for that. Yeah, I can say another thing all the questions, but once you know something, like every year I said, okay, it's up to you, you have to say something. You can understand the sidelines and something has to buy, because if you don't all start by that, it's going to be about now 25 million people that are trafficked in every single year. They 150 billion every year, only second to drug trafficking. So human trafficking more than drugs. Okay, so this is something that's every big problem. It could be your sister, your brother, and your neighbor. It could be anyone, your friends. I mean, it's definitely time for everybody to start paying attention. I'll say that.
So I do have one question that's came in. Do traffickers usually know the person that they will traffic, or do they make people?
From our experience here, oftentimes there will be some kind of connection between them. The biggest recurring that we're seeing is the romance. So it may start as a girlfriend and it rolls into the trafficking. I would say most of our cases, they do know each other. We have social media, all people actually meet person and they caught up in the vicious cycle. That's the majority of ours do know who is trafficking them.
And when we say boyfriend, sometimes the girl may think that it's the boyfriend when it's traffickers grooming them. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And that happens with males too.
The majority of our cases, I think we call this. The majority of cases, the victims are females. The guy, I think Bill, I guess some victims are males, but it's just a more easy to female victims. In most cases, but males are susceptible to victims of trafficking, especially labor trafficking people.
So I have a question for them.
But yes, if they reach out, they can go to the website, there's a place to reach out, and Gail will reach back instead of time. We do, we're doing Zoom trainings right now, but there's not much to do. I know that some of the way they're working that support is also on volunteer. A survivor that was trafficked from She had to do a video. She thought she was dancing video, and they put out as a trafficker. Well, she's been in help, and the life's been pretty mature help. And she came, she's a little bit she's a little older, and she came met us. And she didn't volunteer like a client. And I said, great, you help me. You definitely need some help. So I immediately put her into therapy, and she's now going to college, and she's going to receive a laptop computer, and she takes me at least once a week, sends me messages, can't wait how to turn around. So, people want to help, but sometimes, especially those that have been trafficked targeted, they might reach out to help, not afraid. They got to build their own issue. So if there's something out there, they're going to UCF or whatever, they want to help it, maybe they have some tragedy in their life, or something they might be trafficking. Let's talk to them, we can get you some help, and thankfully it's really life.
So we have a question for me. The first airport, how often does trafficking happen?
So the data that's collected on that is basically, the report. So if you look at the top 3 states in the United States, California, Texas, Florida, the number of cases of trafficking. All the research that we have, or the federal project, the FBI, is that most of our trafficking are transportation systems, highways, because they don't provide identification. So you'll see a lot of that flat as a jail. The charter will fly you somewhere in order to traffic further. So I've heard that traffic from Jersey Islands, near different states to the airports. So the same things to identify. This person not have any personal belongings on them. Are they carrying their own ID? Are they not carrying their own cell phone? All the same key indicators to look for. Do you guys have something to add to that?
A lot of us and we saw a case with the Alaska Airlines flight attendant several years, I think it was in 2011. She was the victim was the male was on the plane. He's doing all the talking. She's not making eye contact, just your signs. And so she left a note for her in the bathroom, and somehow got her to the bathroom and said, "You need help," and she did, and she was a victim, and they basically rescued her and stuff like that. But so of course, I will say this. And I said this on a call not too long ago. A couple years ago, I had received an award, and they were ready to get on a plane, and I noticed that there was an older white gentleman with 2 younger Hispanic boys, maybe 11, 12, around that age. And the one child was crying and went down on the floor, and the man was just sitting there looking livid. And so I'm watching this play out, and I'm thinking that gut feeling something's off. And so and I guess it was his brother, maybe I don't know, tried to console him, and the kid got up and started wanted to kind of just get away. And the man had his hands behind his back and just kind of blocked his body. Didn't lay his hands on him, blocked his body. Just the whole thing was off. And so I went to the flight attendant, it happened at Alaska Air, and I said, here's my card, this is what I do, something off. And she would catch me. And so on the plane, the manager came up, superintendent, whatever, and they had looked at the manifest, and she said to me, "Oh, that's the son, that's his kid." And I said, "How do you know that?" Because they have the last name. But she's not she's baby when he got there. So he's a living being, it's nothing. It is then 2 children are safe. So again, not only if you see something, say something, do something. Do something. Like I said, not everything starts to a lot of things about even best ways that you can be. It's basically kidnapping. That's what it is. So if you see somebody snatched, you're not snatched, you're just kind of the airport or somewhere. That's what you can traffic. That's on PC. And that kind of so what happened in the meantime? If something's going down, they need to do it so they can do it quickly. We are trained here in Singapore. I don't think I look at the company we're still here because we do have law enforcement able to take action. So
I have another great question that came in. How should you know the data traffickers when you trafficking?
I think I'm not for that one. If one of your friends, family members, classmates, who are maybe if they are really educated in these workshops, they want to look for projects on site, and I can look at all the statistics that are there for them. We've done analysis, which is a great part of this. We've trained as well as project. Just get educated, and so that they because you might think that you love your life on Facebook, and he's just amazing, and he'll take you to Australia and buy basic things, he brings you trinkets, he's amazing, and in that case, the worst never happened to you. So not everything might happen, but be educated on it.
If having call victim services on human services, maybe going something like you can call, they can do all the options. Who is employed right now when you type services, that's 24-hour hotline. There's also a service center. There's just and there's all across the nation. So sometimes just saying you might not want to talk to me, but you want to talk to somebody else, here you go. But they're in danger. I don't know.
Definitely. Do you have any other fascinating questions? Hey, last reminder, just a please don't state your law enforcement or the national human trafficking hotline using methods listed on the slide. On behalf of UCF Victim Services, we would like to thank our panelists and our audience for joining us to learn about this important issue in our community. Panelists, please feel free to emergency contact information or your office and chat for audience and connections interested in learning more about your agency. We hope you all enjoy this important and informative discussion. As a reminder, this recording session will be uploaded to our website at the conclusion of this presentation. We also hope you will join us next Wednesday for a workshop titled Me and My Shadow. This stalking awareness workshop will focus on a variety of issues related to stalking, including the different types of stalking, options available to those that experience stalking, and long-term impact this can have on an individual. We're going to close this session for a reminder that UCF is for you 24/7. If you hear something that you know is experiencing violence or abuse, please call or text our hotline to speak with an advocate. Numbers are listed there on the slide for your convenience. So include our human trafficking type. I will be in the recording at this time. I hope everything for the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Oh, it's a little puppy spirit.